In the beginning, long before numbers were written down and long before value had names, people lived close to what they could see and touch. Food was gathered or hunted. Shelter was built by hand. Tools were shaped from stone, bone, and wood. Life moved at the pace of seasons. Trust was local. Memory was long. When one person had more grain than another, or one family had better tools, exchange began quietly. Not as a system, but as a human response to uneven abundance. A basket of grain could be traded for a sharpened blade. A hide could be traded for salt. These exchanges were personal. They relied on familiarity. They relied on the expectation that both sides understood the effort behind what was given. But these early trades carried limits. Grain spoiled, meat decayed, tools broke, animals escaped or died. Many things that were useful could not be stored for long. Many things that were valuable could not be divided easily. And many things that mattered could not travel far. As communities grew, memory alone could no longer hold the weight of obligation. A person might trade with someone they had never met before, someone who would not be seen again. Trust had to stretch beyond the village. This is where certain materials began to change their role. Not because they were chosen by rulers or invented by planners, but because human behavior, repeated across generations, slowly filtered what worked from what did not. Gold did not begin as money. It began as something noticed. In riverbeds, small yellow flecks appeared among stones and sand. They did not rust. They did not fade. They did not break apart easily. They reflected light in a way that felt different from other metals. At first, this difference had no economic meaning. It carried symbolic weight before it carried practical use. It was worn. It was given. It was placed near the body or near the dead. Gold did not feed anyone. It did not protect against cold. It did not cut wood or shape stone. And yet, across civilizations that never spoke to one another, it kept reappearing. In ancient Mesopotamia, gold was measured by weight long before coins existed. In Egypt, it was associated with permanence, with the sun, with continuity beyond a single lifetime. In the Indus Valley, it was shaped into ornaments with careful precision. In China, it held ritual significance alongside jade. In the Americas, it was revered long before it was ever traded. These cultures did not share a market. They shared something deeper. They shared human perception. Gold behaved in a way that matched long-term human needs. It did not decay. It did not corrode. It could be melted and reshaped without losing itself. A small amount could carry significant weight. A large amount could be divided without losing meaning. Most importantly, it was difficult to create. Gold could not be grown. It could not be bred. It could not be made quickly through labor alone. It required discovery, effort, and time. Scarcity that cannot be easily manipulated has a quiet power. People did not need to be taught this. They observed it. Over time, gold became something that could wait. A farmer could harvest grain and trade a portion of it for gold, knowing that the grain would rot but the gold would remain. A craftsman could exchange tools for gold and trust that its form would still exist years later. A traveler could carry gold across distance without losing value to decay or bulk. This quality of waiting mattered deeply in early societies. Time was uncertain. Seasons failed. Floods came. Droughts followed. Political order shifted. Families rose and fell. Gold did not respond to these changes. It did not promise growth. It did not offer return. It simply stayed. As trade expanded beyond local boundaries, something else became necessary. A shared reference. When two people did not speak the same language, did not worship the same gods, and did not live under the same authority, they still needed a way to agree on value. Gold did not require belief. It required recognition. A weight could be measured. Purity could be tested. The metal itself did not change depending on who held it. This neutrality mattered. It allowed exchange without intimacy. It allowed agreement without friendship. It allowed continuity without memory. Eventually, authority noticed what behavior had already established. Rulers began stamping pieces of metal, not to create value, but to declare weight and purity. The mark did not replace the metal. It rested upon it. Coins did not invent trust. They borrowed it. Even then, gold was not dominant because it was perfect. It was dominant because it balanced competing human needs better than alternatives. Silver was more abundant, but tarnished more easily. Copper was useful but bulky. Grain was essential but unstable. Livestock was valuable but alive. Gold existed outside immediate survival. That distance made it reliable. As societies became more complex, debt emerged. Promises extended beyond present exchange. Future obligations needed a stable reference point. Gold did not care about the future. That is what made it suitable to represent it. A debt written in grain depended on harvest. A debt written in labor depended on health. A debt written in animals depended on life itself. A debt written in gold depended only on existence. Over centuries, this quiet suitability hardened into convention. People began to think of gold not as an object, but as an anchor. Something that remained when stories changed. Something that survived when systems failed. Something that passed through generations without losing identity. Gold became a way to compress time. A lifetime of effort could be stored in a form that did not ask questions. A lineage could pass value forward without explanation. A civilization could collapse and gold would still be recognized by the next one. This continuity mattered in ways that are difficult to see in short spans. Gold did not eliminate fear. It softened uncertainty. When trust in rulers weakened, gold remained familiar. When borders shifted, gold crossed them quietly. When records were lost, gold did not forget its weight. It required no language. It required no promise. It required no enforcement. This does not mean gold was always used ethically or evenly. Power concentrated around it. Inequality followed it. Conflict formed around its extraction and control. But these outcomes were not unique to gold. They followed value itself. What distinguishes gold is not virtue, but endurance. Across centuries, people returned to it not because it offered improvement, but because it offered stability. Not because it created prosperity, but because it preserved what already existed. Gold became money not by decision, but by repetition. Generation after generation tested materials against human needs. What decayed was replaced. What failed was abandoned. What endured was kept. Gold endured. Even when new systems emerged, gold often remained nearby, waiting quietly in the background, held in reserve, stored away, rarely discussed but rarely forgotten. Its role shifted. Its prominence rose and fell, but its presence continued. Gold does not demand attention. It does not adapt. It does not innovate. It waits. That waiting, repeated across civilizations, across collapses and rebuilds, across belief systems and political forms, is what gave it meaning. Not as a symbol of wealth, but as a response to human uncertainty. In that sense, gold did not shape civilization. Civilization shaped gold's role by repeatedly turning toward what remained when everything else changed. And so it stayed. Not moving forward, not moving backwards, simply remaining. As societies continued to expand, the rhythm of life began to stretch beyond immediate memory. Children were born into systems they did not create. They inherited tools, customs, debts, and expectations. Value was no longer something earned and exchanged within a single lifetime. It moved across generations. Gold fit into this shift quietly. A person could bury gold and retrieve it years later. A family could pass it forward without instruction. A community could lose its written records and still recognize it. This made gold useful in a particular human moment, the moment when memory fails. Early writing systems were fragile. Clay tablets broke. Papyrus burned. Ink faded. Oral histories shifted with each telling. Authority depended on continuity, but continuity was difficult to maintain. Gold did not rely on documentation. It carried no story, yet survived every story. As trade routes formed, gold began to travel farther than the people who first shaped it. It moved across deserts, seas, and mountain passes. Each hand that received it may have interpreted it differently, but the metal itself remained unchanged. This consistency created something subtle. Expectation. When a merchant accepted gold, the acceptance was not based on trust in the previous owner. It was based on trust in the next one. Gold linked strangers across time. This forward-looking trust is unusual in human behavior. Most trust is backward-looking. It depends on past interaction. Gold reversed this. It allowed trust to exist without history. Over time, this altered how societies organized themselves. Markets became less personal. Trade became more abstract. Obligations could be measured rather than remembered. Gold did not cause this abstraction. It supported it. As political systems grew more centralized, rulers sought ways to standardize value. They needed to collect taxes, pay soldiers, and fund projects that span years. Irregular barter could not sustain this scale. Gold offered a solution without negotiation. It could be weighed. It could be stored. It could be redistributed. Importantly, it could be taken and still be desired by those who received it. This mattered for authority. A ruler could compel payment in gold because gold did not need persuasion. The people already recognized it. Enforcement relied on power, but acceptance relied on shared understanding. Even when rulers debased coinage or altered weights, the reference point remained the metal itself. Trust shifted away from the stamp and back toward substance. This tension repeated many times. Whenever authority stretched too far, people quietly recalibrated. They weighed coins. They tested purity. They adjusted expectations. Gold did not argue. It simply revealed inconsistency. In many civilizations, gold was reserved not for daily exchange, but for storage of surplus. Daily life used other mediums, but gold waited in treasuries, temples, and private holdings. This separation is important. Gold was not money because it was frequently used. It was money because it was rarely questioned. It existed at the edge of the system, not its center. As empires expanded and contracted, gold followed a familiar path. It concentrated during stability. It dispersed during collapse. It crossed borders as people fled uncertainty. It returned when order reformed. Throughout these cycles, gold did not promise safety. It reflected it. People turned to gold when other forms of trust weakened. Not out of fear alone, but out of habit learned over centuries. Gold had already proven that it did not disappear. This proof mattered more than theory. In some cultures, gold was tied to the divine. In others, it was treated as purely material. These interpretations varied widely, but the behavior remained consistent. Gold was kept close. Even societies that rejected accumulation often preserved gold in ritual contexts. Even systems that emphasized equality still recognized its permanence. This suggests that gold's role did not depend on ideology. It depended on time. Human systems tend to overestimate their own durability. Each generation believes its structures will last. Gold exists as a quiet counterpoint to this belief. It does not oppose progress. It simply does not participate in it. When new forms of money emerged, based on paper or promise, gold often stepped back rather than disappearing. It became a reference rather than a tool. Paper could move faster. It could represent larger systems. It could be issued and adjusted, but it required belief in continuity. Gold required none. This difference shaped long-term behavior. People used flexible systems for daily life and relied on enduring ones for preservation. Gold occupied the second role, not because it was superior, but because it was patient. As centuries passed, knowledge of gold's role became embedded in culture rather than taught explicitly. Proverbs formed. Customs solidified. Legal systems acknowledged it. Gold became less visible and more assumed. This invisibility is often misunderstood. Gold did not lose importance when it became quiet. It gained it. The less it needed explanation, the more deeply it was integrated. When societies experienced long periods of stability, gold receded into the background. When instability returned, it resurfaced without effort. This pattern repeated across continents. It did not require coordination. It did not require agreements. It emerged naturally from repeated human response to uncertainty and continuity. Gold became money not because it solved every problem, but because it survived every solution. It did not eliminate risk. It provided a constant against which risk could be measured. It did not create trust. It allowed trust to rest. In this way, gold's role was never aggressive. It did not push itself forward. It waited until it was needed. And when it was needed, it was already there. Waiting does not attract attention. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. But over long spans of time, waiting shapes outcomes more reliably than action. Gold became money by doing very little, very consistently, for a very long time. And that consistency, more than any decree or discovery, is what carried it forward. As time continued to pass, the relationship between gold and human systems grew quieter rather than louder. By this point, gold no longer needed to prove itself. Its role was already embedded in habit. People did not debate its properties. They acted as if those properties were self-evident. This is often how the deepest forms of trust operate. They stop being discussed. In many societies, gold began to retreat from daily visibility. Markets used other mediums for ordinary exchange. Gold remained still, held in places rarely visited, brought out only when the scale of value exceeded ordinary life. This separation created a subtle psychological effect. Gold became associated not with consumption, but with preservation. Food was eaten, tools were used, currency circulated. Gold stayed. Because it stayed, it became linked to continuity rather than activity. To hold gold was not to act, but to pause. This pause mattered. Human beings live inside short cycles. Days, seasons, years. Gold existed beyond these cycles. It did not reflect effort in motion, but effort completed. It did not represent intention, but memory. In this way, gold became a material form of restraint. It did not encourage spending. It did not reward speed. It did not invite speculation in its earliest roles. It simply existed as a record of past labor and past trust. This role was reinforced by how gold behaved physically. It could be melted and reshaped without being consumed. A coin could become a bar. A bar could become jewelry. Jewelry could become coin again. Through all of this, the gold itself remained unchanged. Very few materials behave this way. Most things are altered by use. Gold resists this. It accepts form without surrendering substance. This made gold suitable for cultures that valued continuity of lineage, inheritance, and memory. Gold could move through generations without accumulating wear. A tool passed down eventually breaks. A structure erodes. A document fades. Gold endures handling. This endurance created another quiet effect. Gold detached value from immediate utility. In early barter, value was tied closely to use. A tool was valuable because it worked. Food was valuable because it sustained life. Gold had little direct utility. Its value came from shared recognition. This shift was significant. It allowed value to exist independently of immediate need. It allowed societies to plan beyond the present moment. It allowed surplus to be stored without decay. This storage of surplus changed human behavior. People could think in longer spans. Projects could extend across years. Obligations could be deferred without dissolving. Gold did not create patience, but it supported it. As civilizations layered complexity upon complexity, systems of credit expanded. Promises were written. Ledgers grew. Institutions emerged to manage trust. Gold remained beneath these systems, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, always implied. When systems functioned well, gold stayed quiet. When systems strained, gold became noticeable again. This oscillation gave gold a particular emotional weight. It became associated with seriousness. Gold was not used for trivial matters. It was not invoked lightly. It appeared in moments of consequence: treaties, dowries, ransoms, endowments, reserves. Because of this, gold came to symbolize not wealth, but finality. A transaction settled in gold felt complete. It did not depend on future conditions. It did not rely on continued cooperation. Gold ended uncertainty rather than extending it. This is why gold often appears at the edges of human conflict. Not because it causes conflict, but because it survives it. When systems break, people fall back on what does not argue. Gold does not debate legitimacy. It does not ask who is right. It remains acceptable even when authority collapses. This neutrality is rare. Most systems depend on agreement. Gold depends on recognition. Recognition can survive disagreement. Across history, there are countless examples of societies inventing new systems, new currencies, new methods of exchange. Many of these systems worked for long periods. Some worked very well. Yet even in these periods, gold often remained present, though diminished. Not because people expected failure, but because experience had taught them that no system is permanent. Gold became a way to acknowledge impermanence without fear. It was not an expression of distrust. It was an expression of memory. Memory that systems rise and fall. Memory that language shifts. Memory that power changes hands. Gold did not compete with systems. It waited beneath them. This waiting shaped its cultural meaning. Gold was not seen as dynamic. It was seen as stable. Not creative but preservative. Not progressive but continuous. These qualities made gold uninteresting during times of expansion and deeply relevant during times of contraction. Over long spans of time, relevance matters more than visibility. Gold's ability to disappear without being forgotten allowed it to survive changes that consumed louder forms of value. In this sense, gold adapted by not adapting. It remained the same while everything around it changed. That sameness is often mistaken for simplicity. In reality, it reflects alignment with a deep human pattern, the desire for something that does not move when everything else does. Gold became money across civilizations not because it offered advantage, but because it offered rest. A place where value could stop. A form that did not demand action. A substance that waited without eroding. And so, as human societies continued their cycles of building, refining, expanding, and undoing, gold remained present in the background, unremarkable and unchanged. Not asserting itself. Not withdrawing completely, simply remaining where it had always been. And over time, that presence became so familiar that it no longer required explanation. As writing became more widespread, value began to be recorded rather than remembered. Clay tablets, parchment, and paper allowed obligations to extend beyond personal familiarity. A promise no longer needed witnesses who would remember it. It could be stored as marks on a surface. This changed how societies thought about exchange. Value could now exist as an abstraction. Numbers replaced objects. Accounts replaced memory. Trust shifted toward symbols. Gold did not resist this shift. It adjusted to it by remaining unchanged. Written records described gold by weight and purity. They did not need to describe its nature. That part was already understood. The writing pointed to gold, but the gold itself remained the reference. In this way, gold became a silent anchor for increasingly symbolic systems. As economies grew more complex, layers formed between people and the material basis of value. Paper claims represented metal. Ledgers represented paper. Institutions represented ledgers. At each layer, trust expanded in scope but became thinner. Gold did not thicken that trust. It gave it boundaries. When symbols drifted too far from substance, gold marked the distance. This did not always happen consciously. Often it appeared as a quiet recalibration. Weights adjusted. Conversions changed. Reserves were counted. Gold acted as a reminder that value, however abstracted, ultimately rested on something finite. Finiteness matters to human psychology. Without limits, expectations stretch endlessly. Promises multiply. Obligations grow without constraint. Systems appear stable until they suddenly are not. Gold imposed a limit without enforcing one. It did not stop expansion. It made expansion measurable. As long-distance trade increased, gold's role became even more pronounced. It moved between cultures that had no shared laws, no shared language, and no shared beliefs. A merchant crossing multiple regions did not need to understand local customs to recognize gold. The metal carried its own legitimacy. This portability of trust was unusual. Most forms of trust are embedded in social context. Gold detached trust from context. It allowed value to travel independently of culture. This independence reduced friction. Trade routes expanded not because gold was exciting, but because it was predictable. Predictability lowers risk. Lower risk encourages movement. Movement changes societies. Ideas spread. Technologies travel. Beliefs intersect. Gold did not cause these exchanges, but it accompanied them, quietly facilitating interaction without requiring alignment. As centuries passed, gold accumulated stories without absorbing them. It passed through empires without belonging to them. It was held by kings and by merchants, by temples and by households. It moved through war and peace without choosing sides. This impartiality contributed to its endurance. Gold was rarely blamed for failure. It was rarely credited for success. It existed beneath both. As financial systems matured, new forms of value emerged that could be created more easily and adjusted more rapidly. These forms were efficient. They supported growth. They allowed coordination on large scales. Gold stepped further back. This retreat was often interpreted as obsolescence. But gold did not disappear. It changed its posture. It became less transactional and more referential. It was no longer needed for daily exchange. It was needed for reassurance. Reassurance does not announce itself. It exists quietly, noticed only when absent. Throughout history, moments of disruption often revealed this relationship. When confidence in systems weakened, attention drifted back toward what had always been there. Not because gold promised solutions, but because it promised continuity. Gold does not solve problems. It survives them. This survival carries psychological weight. Humans are forward-looking, but they are also shaped by memory. They remember what lasted through previous uncertainty. Gold's history gave it credibility that no new system could replicate immediately. This credibility was cumulative. Each generation inherited not just gold, but the knowledge that their ancestors had trusted it. Trust transmitted through time becomes tradition. Tradition does not require explanation. It operates through repetition. Gold's role became traditional long before it became theoretical. Philosophers later attempted to explain why gold functioned as it did. Economists formalized its properties. Legal systems codified its use. But these explanations followed behavior. They did not precede it. People had already chosen gold through centuries of action. This order matters. Gold did not become money because it met a definition. Definitions were written because gold had already become money. This distinction explains why gold's role persisted even as definitions changed. Money was reimagined many times. Gold remained recognizable through each reimagining. Not dominant, not obsolete, present. As societies learned to live with increasing abstraction, gold became a kind of memory embedded in the system, a reminder of earlier constraints, a link to material reality. This memory was not nostalgic. It was functional. It reminded systems that value could not expand infinitely without consequence. It reminded people that promises ultimately rested on finite resources. Gold did not enforce restraint. It symbolized it. Symbols do not act. They wait to be interpreted. Gold waited. As time continued, new generations encountered gold not as a necessity, but as an inheritance. Something already there. Something already accepted. Its meaning was no longer debated. It was assumed. Assumptions shape behavior more deeply than arguments. Gold's quiet assumption across civilizations is what allowed it to persist without persuasion. It did not need advocates. It had time. Over very long spans of time, human attention shifts away from what functions smoothly. What works becomes invisible. Gold entered this stage slowly. It was no longer discussed as a choice. It was treated as a given. People spoke of it the way they spoke of land or seasons, not as inventions, but as conditions. This is often mistaken for cultural reverence. In reality, it is behavioral familiarity. Gold became part of the background architecture of value. When something reaches this stage, it begins to influence behavior indirectly. People no longer ask what it is for. They ask only how much there is. Quantity replaces explanation. This shift changes how societies think about limits. Gold could not be expanded at will. Its presence in the earth was fixed beyond human control. Extraction required effort, coordination, and time. Even powerful societies could not produce it quickly. This slowness mattered more than scarcity alone. Slow-changing references stabilize long systems. When value changes too easily, planning becomes fragile. Expectations stretch. Promises multiply. Confidence grows faster than reality. Gold moved at a different pace. Its pace was geological, not political. This mismatch between human urgency and gold's indifference created tension, but also balance. Systems grew around gold, knowing it would not adjust to them. They had to adjust to it. Over centuries, this produced a kind of discipline, even when not consciously intended. Large undertakings required accumulation. Accumulation required patience. Patience filtered ambition. Not all ambition, but reckless ambition. Gold did not prevent excess. It made excess visible. When claims expanded faster than gold, the distance could be measured. When obligations multiplied, their weight could be compared against something fixed. This comparison did not always stop collapse, but it often delayed it. And delay in human systems can mean survival. As societies experienced repeated cycles of expansion and contraction, this pattern reinforced itself. Gold became associated with the long view. Not optimism, not pessimism, duration. It is important to notice what gold did not become. It did not become a moral guide. It did not define fairness. It did not distribute itself evenly. It did not reward virtue. Gold remained neutral. Neutrality allowed it to persist across belief systems. Societies could disagree about justice, governance, divinity, and hierarchy, yet still recognize gold. Recognition does not require agreement. This quality made gold compatible with pluralism long before pluralism had a name. As trade networks connected distant regions, gold often served as the final point of settlement. Intermediate exchanges used local systems. Final balances returned to gold. This layered use reflected trust gradients. Close relationships used trust. Distant ones used gold. As trust expanded, gold receded. As trust contracted, gold returned. This ebb and flow did not require coordination. It followed human instinct. When uncertainty rises, people seek references that do not argue back. Gold does not argue. It does not claim legitimacy. It does not explain itself. It does not persuade. It simply exists in a form that humans have learned, over long experience, to recognize as stable. That recognition is not intellectual. It is behavioral. People act as if gold will be accepted tomorrow because it was accepted yesterday. This expectation reinforces itself. Self-reinforcing behaviors are powerful. They do not need enforcement. They persist through repetition. Gold's role became self-reinforcing across civilizations that never coordinated and never agreed. This convergence is often described as inevitability. A more accurate word is alignment. Gold aligned with multiple human constraints at once: memory, trust, transport, storage, division, and time. No single property explains its role. The combination does. Other materials shared some of these traits. None shared all of them in the same balance. This balance mattered more than optimization. Gold was not the best at any one thing. It was adequate at many things that mattered simultaneously. Human systems favor adequacy over perfection when durability is required. As generations passed, the original reasons for gold's role faded from conscious awareness. People no longer needed to articulate them. The behavior remained. This forgetting is part of stability. When reasons must be constantly restated, systems are fragile. When reasons can be forgotten without consequence, systems endure. Gold endured even as its explanation blurred. At times, societies attempted to replace it entirely. New systems promised efficiency, flexibility, and responsiveness. Many succeeded for long periods. During these times, gold waited. It did not resist displacement. It did not compete for attention. It did not assert necessity. Waiting is a form of resilience. When conditions favored speed, gold stepped aside. When conditions favored endurance, it returned. This adaptability through non-action is often overlooked. Gold did not adapt by changing itself. It adapted by allowing others to change around it. That patience is rare in human design. Human systems are often built to respond. Gold's strength was that it did not. As history accumulated, gold became less a tool and more a reference frame. It provided a way to orient value across time without requiring continuity of institutions. Institutions require maintenance. Gold requires recognition. Recognition survived even when maintenance failed. This distinction explains why gold outlived countless systems designed with intention and intelligence. Intentions age. Gold did not have intentions. It existed before human systems recognized it, and it continued after those systems dissolved. This continuity gave it a role that could not be engineered deliberately. It emerged from interaction, not design. Over time, people stopped seeing gold as something that became money. They saw it as something that always had been. This perception is not historically accurate, but it is psychologically meaningful. When something feels timeless, it becomes trusted in ways that logic alone cannot produce. Trust built over time becomes instinct. Gold's place across civilizations rests on this instinctive trust, accumulated slowly, reinforced quietly, and rarely examined closely. Not because examination would weaken it, but because examination was unnecessary. Gold did what it had always done. It remained. As centuries layered themselves one upon another, the pace of human systems continued to accelerate, while gold remained unchanged. This contrast became more pronounced with time. Administration grew more complex. Records multiplied. Authority extended over wider territories. Decisions affected people who would never meet the decision makers. The distance between action and consequence widened. Gold did not shrink that distance. It marked it. When value moved through writing rather than through objects, trust shifted toward interpretation. Marks on paper could represent many things at once. They could be reinterpreted, reassigned, or revised. Gold resisted reinterpretation. Its meaning did not expand. Its role did not diversify. It stayed narrow, and that narrowness became a strength. Gold meant one thing. It meant weight, not intention, not promise, not future effort. Weight. Weight can be verified without beliefs. It can be tested without authority. It can be measured without language. This made gold useful in moments when systems disagreed with themselves, when laws conflicted, when leadership changed, when records were disputed. Gold did not resolve these conflicts. It stood apart from them. Standing apart is different from standing above. Gold did not claim superiority. It offered separation. In many cultures, this separation gave gold a ceremonial role. It appeared in rituals not because it was sacred in itself, but because it represented continuity across generations. Rituals exist to carry meaning forward when explanation is insufficient. Gold functioned similarly. It allowed value to pass through time without needing reinterpretation. As societies developed philosophies and theories about value, gold often occupied an uncomfortable position. It was too material for idealists and too passive for reformers. It did not promise improvement. It did not adapt to ideals. This made it resistant to ideological capture. Ideologies rise and fall. They reinterpret the world through their own frameworks. Gold remained uninterpreted. People could project meaning onto it, but the metal itself did not change. This neutrality allowed it to survive ideological shifts that consumed more expressive systems. Gold did not require justification. Justifications change. As systems grew increasingly abstract, gold's lack of abstraction became noticeable again. It stood as a reminder that not all value could be represented symbolically without loss. Symbols are efficient. They compress complexity, but compression removes texture. Gold retained texture. It could be held, weighed, hidden, recovered. This physicality anchored value in the sensory world, even as much of economic life moved away from it. Humans are embodied creatures. Abstract systems strain when they lose contact with physical reference points. Gold provided that reference quietly, not daily, but sufficiently. Over long periods, this occasional anchoring helped systems recalibrate. Gold did not prevent drift. It limited disorientation. As knowledge accumulated, scholars attempted to define what made something suitable as money. They identified properties: durability, divisibility, portability, scarcity. Gold fit these definitions well, but these definitions were descriptive, not causal. They described what had already been chosen. Gold was not selected because it fit criteria. Criteria were formed because gold fit them. This reversal is important. It shows that human behavior precedes theory. Long before formal understanding, people acted in ways that proved workable. Gold survived those actions. In many places, gold's presence became more symbolic than practical. It appeared in crowns, ornaments, and monuments. This symbolism is often mistaken for decadence. In reality, it reflects distance. When gold was abundant relative to a society's needs, it moved toward display. When it was scarce relative to uncertainty, it moved toward storage. Display and storage are two ends of the same spectrum. Both acknowledge value. One expresses confidence, the other expresses caution. Gold accommodated both without changing itself. As time passed, new materials and technologies emerged that altered how humans thought about scarcity and production. Value could be represented, transferred, and multiplied in ways previously impossible. Gold did not compete with these innovations. It remained where it always had. This constancy sometimes created frustration. Gold did not keep pace with ambition. It did not respond to demand. It did not accelerate with systems. But that frustration revealed something important. Gold was not designed to serve human desire. It reflected human limits. Limits are uncomfortable. They are also stabilizing. By existing outside human control, gold reminded societies that not everything meaningful could be adjusted on command. This reminder did not require enforcement. It operated through presence. Presence does not argue. It waits. Across civilizations, languages, and belief systems, gold accumulated this role without instruction. No council decided it. No treaty established it. No theory predicted it. It emerged from repetition across time. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates trust. Trust creates endurance. Gold's endurance is not mysterious when seen through this lens. It did not survive because it was powerful. It survived because it was aligned with how humans respond to uncertainty, memory, and time. Gold did not teach these responses. It matched them. And because it matched them, it remained recognizable even when everything else changed. As centuries continued to unfold, gold did not seek relevance. Relevance came to it when needed. When not needed, it remained quiet. This quiet persistence is easy to overlook in short spans, but across long spans, it becomes decisive. Gold did not become money in a moment. It became money slowly, by remaining acceptable when other forms fell away. And so it continued, not as an invention, not as a solution, but as a constant reference. Still, unchanged, waiting. As the accumulation of centuries continued, gold's role became increasingly shaped by absence rather than presence. It was not what people used most often that defined its meaning, but what they turned to when other things failed to serve their purpose. In everyday life, value flowed quickly. Goods moved. Labor changed hands. Promises were made and fulfilled or forgotten. Systems relied on momentum. Gold did not move with momentum. It waited at the edges. This edge position gave it a particular psychological character. It was not associated with effort in motion, but with effort completed. Not with hope, but with memory. Not with expectation, but with record. A person holding gold was not anticipating tomorrow. They were preserving yesterday. This distinction matters. Human beings live forward, but they carry the past. Most systems are designed to serve movement. Few are designed to serve memory. Gold served memory without narrative. It did not tell stories. It did not encode meaning. It simply remained. Because of this, gold became a way to transfer effort across time without interpretation. A unit of gold did not explain how it was earned. It did not reveal whether it came from labor, trade, conquest, or inheritance. It erased context. Erasing context can be dangerous. It can also be stabilizing. By stripping value of its origin, gold allowed societies to interact without reopening old claims. A transaction settled in gold did not carry history forward. It ended it. This made gold useful in closing chapters. Wars ended with gold. Debts were cleared with gold. Alliances were sealed with gold. Gold did not reconcile differences. It closed accounts. Closure is often undervalued in discussions of human systems. Without closure, obligations linger. Lingering obligations become resentment. Resentment destabilizes systems. Gold provided finality. Finality does not require fairness. It requires acceptance. Gold was accepted because it did not require explanation. Over long periods, this function reinforced itself. People learned that disputes settled in gold did not resurface easily. The metal carried no argument. As societies matured, they became more aware of the fragility of their own arrangements. Even powerful civilizations encountered limits. Administrative overload, corruption, fragmentation, loss of coherence. In these moments, gold's silence became noticeable. It did not offer solutions. It offered continuity. Continuity allowed rebuilding. After collapse, survivors often returned to basic forms of exchange. Local trust re-emerged. Barter resumed. Gradually, systems reformed. Gold often reappeared early in this process, not because it accelerated recovery, but because it allowed value to persist through the collapse itself. People who had stored gold did not need functioning institutions to recognize it. They did not need laws or ledgers. Recognition was enough. This allowed pockets of continuity to survive within disruption. Continuity does not prevent collapse, but it shapes what follows. Gold shaped aftermaths. This role is difficult to see when focusing only on periods of growth. It becomes clearer when observing transitions. Gold was present not at peaks, but at turning points, at the edges of eras, at the boundary between what had been and what would come next. This boundary role gave gold a temporal significance beyond economics. It became a bridge across discontinuity. Bridges do not determine destinations. They allow passage. Gold allowed passage. Across generations, this function accumulated quietly. Each collapse that gold survived added to its credibility. Each transition it bridged reinforced its place. People did not need to know the details of past collapses to inherit this behavior. They inherited the behavior itself. This inheritance was subtle. Children learned that certain things were kept safe. Certain objects were not spent lightly. Certain materials were reserved. Gold often occupied this reserved space. Reservation implies restraint. Restraint shapes culture. Cultures that developed long-term continuity often preserved some form of restraint around value. Gold became one expression of that restraint, not universally and not perfectly, but repeatedly. As time went on, gold's role became increasingly implicit. It no longer needed to be named as money to function as one. Its acceptance was assumed. Assumption is a powerful force. Assumptions shape behavior more deeply than rules. Rules require enforcement. Assumptions guide action silently. Gold guided action without instruction. It was known without being taught. This knowledge was not intellectual. It was practical. People acted as if gold would matter later. And because they acted that way, it did. This circularity is not logical. It is human. Many enduring systems rest on such loops. Gold's loop was simple. It was accepted because it had been accepted. It continued to be accepted because it was. No additional justification was required. This simplicity allowed gold to survive complexity. As societies layered laws, technologies, and abstractions onto value, gold remained untouched by those layers. It did not resist them. It simply existed beneath them. When layers were removed, gold was still there. This made it resilient not through strength, but through detachment. Detachment is often mistaken for irrelevance. In reality, it can be a form of durability. Gold did not need to be central to remain significant. It needed only to remain recognizable. Recognition persisted. As long as humans remembered that gold had mattered before, it retained the possibility of mattering again. Possibility is enough. Gold did not demand use. It offered availability. Availability across time is rare. Human creations often depend on maintenance. Gold depended on memory. Memory outlasted maintenance. As this pattern repeated, gold's presence became almost geological in human thought. Like mountains or rivers, it was seen as part of the landscape rather than part of the system. Systems changed. Landscapes endured. Gold joined the landscape of value, not dominating it, not disappearing into it, simply existing alongside it, unchanged, patient, and available when needed. And so, without announcement or declaration, gold continued its long role across civilizations, not as a leader, not as a solution, but as a constant companion to human uncertainty, carried forward quietly, one generation at a time. As the long sweep of history continued, gold's relationship with human perception grew quieter still. It became less something people talked about and more something they assumed would always be there. Assumption is a form of trust that no longer feels like trust. It feels like gravity. It does not require attention. It does not require defense. Gold reached this state slowly. By then, its presence no longer needed stories. It no longer needed justification. It no longer needed ritual to explain it. It simply occupied a place that had been shaped for it by centuries of repetition. This place was not always visible. Often it was hidden. Gold was buried, stored, sealed away, passed silently from one hand to another. It lived in containers, vaults, walls, and memory. Hidden things exert a different kind of influence than visible ones. They shape behavior without shaping appearance. Because gold was often hidden, it was associated less with display and more with reserve, less with identity and more with continuity. This association altered how people related to the future. Most plans depend on assumptions about stability. Crops will grow. Work will be rewarded. Systems will function. When these assumptions weaken, planning contracts. Gold allowed planning to continue even when assumptions were fragile. Not planning for expansion, planning for survival. Survival planning does not require optimism. It requires continuity. Gold offered continuity without promise. This absence of promise is important. Gold did not guarantee outcomes. It did not ensure safety. It did not prevent loss. It simply remained. Remaining is not protection. It is persistence. Persistence allows recovery. When societies recovered from disruption, gold often played a quiet role in reestablishing exchange. It did not rebuild institutions. It did not restore trust overnight, but it allowed value to exist while trust was rebuilt. Trust takes time. Gold allowed time to pass without dissolving value. This is one of its least visible roles. It functioned as a pause between systems. Human history is often described as a sequence of systems. In reality, it is a sequence of transitions. The spaces between systems matter as much as the systems themselves. Gold occupied those spaces. In transitions, people need something that does not depend on the old system and does not require the new one to exist yet. Gold fit this requirement. It did not belong to any single structure. It could survive the gap. Gaps are dangerous places. Norms weaken. Authority fragments. Coordination breaks down. Gold did not coordinate. It did not command. It did not organize. It allowed individuals to carry value through the gap. This individual portability mattered. Large systems fail at once. Individuals fail separately. Gold allowed individual continuity, even when collective continuity broke. This is not a moral statement. It is an observation. Gold did not create resilience. It aligned with it. As centuries continued, gold's role became increasingly associated with time rather than exchange. It was something that lasted, something that waited, something that did not hurry. Hurry is a human trait. Gold did not share it. This difference shaped perception. Gold came to represent patience, even though it did nothing actively patient. It simply did not change. Humans project meaning onto what does not respond. A mountain seems patient. A river seems persistent. Gold seemed enduring. These perceptions are not accurate descriptions of intent. They are reflections of human response to non-reactivity. Gold did not react. In a world of reacting systems, this made it distinct. As technologies accelerated communication and exchange, the contrast between speed and stillness grew sharper. Many systems optimized for immediacy. Gold remained slow. Slowness is often framed as inefficiency. Over long periods, it can be a form of stability. Fast systems amplify both success and failure. Slow references dampen extremes. Gold dampened, not always enough to prevent collapse, but enough to shape aftermaths. This shaping was subtle. After disruption, people often returned to simpler forms of exchange. They trusted what they could see. They valued what they could hold. Gold re-entered these simplified spaces naturally. It did not require reintroduction. Recognition was enough. Recognition had survived. This survival of recognition across disruption is rare. Many symbols lose meaning when contexts change. Gold's meaning did not depend on context. It depended on continuity of human behavior. Behavior is more durable than ideology. Ideologies are taught. Behavior is inherited. Gold's acceptance was inherited, not through instruction but through example. People saw others keep it, protect it, pass it on. They learned what mattered by watching what endured. This learning did not require explanation. Over time, gold's role became less about function and more about position. It occupied the far end of time. Daily exchange lived in the present. Credit extended into the near future. Gold stretched across generations. This temporal layering allowed societies to operate on multiple time horizons at once. Short-term needs could be met without sacrificing long-term continuity. Gold did not create this layering. It enabled it. By existing outside immediate cycles, gold allowed those cycles to turn without consuming everything. This separation of time horizons is a quiet feature of stable systems. When all value exists in the present, systems become brittle. When some value exists beyond the present, systems can absorb shocks. Gold carried value beyond the present, not infinitely, but long enough. As human societies continued to change, gold did not require adaptation to remain relevant. It required only recognition. Recognition persisted because it was simple. Gold was heavy. Gold was rare. Gold did not change. These facts did not need reinterpretation. They were observed. Observation is stronger than belief. Beliefs change. Observations accumulate. Gold accumulated observations across time. Each generation observed that it had mattered before. That observation became expectation. Expectation became habit. Habit became tradition. Tradition became assumption. Assumption became silence. Silence is the final stage of integration. When something is fully integrated, it is no longer discussed. Gold reached this stage in many cultures. It did not vanish. It stopped needing words. And in that wordless state, it continued to do what it had always done. It remained available when needed. It remained unremarkable when not. It remained unchanged while everything around it moved. And so, without seeking attention, without demanding relevance, without resisting change, gold continued to occupy its quiet place in human history, not as a force, not as a guide, but as a constant presence beside human uncertainty, waiting, as it always had. As time moved forward, the distance between gold and everyday life continued to widen, yet its influence did not weaken. It simply moved deeper. When something becomes deeply embedded, it no longer needs to appear often. Its effect is felt through absence rather than presence. Gold reached this state slowly, almost imperceptibly. Most people no longer encountered gold directly. They encountered representations, substitutes, symbols. Gold itself remained out of reach, stored away, rarely handled. This separation changed how gold functioned in the human mind. It became less associated with exchange and more associated with certainty. Certainty is not excitement. It does not stimulate. It reassures. Reassurance does not demand attention. It reduces noise. Gold reduced noise. In complex societies, noise accumulates quickly. Information multiplies. Signals overlap. Claims compete. Distinctions blur. Gold did not add to this complexity. It remained singular. One metal, one substance, one reference. This singularity mattered in an environment of increasing plurality. As systems layered abstraction upon abstraction, people needed at least one point that did not shift with interpretation. Gold filled that role by remaining uninterpreted. It did not express policy. It did not embody intention. It did not represent ideology. It existed as itself. This self-contained nature insulated gold from change. When institutions redefined value, gold did not require redefinition. When language evolved, gold did not require translation. When borders shifted, gold did not require renegotiation. It passed through transitions intact. Transitions are the most revealing moments in history. They expose what is dependent and what is independent. Gold repeatedly demonstrated independence. Not independence from people, but independence from systems. This distinction matters. Gold had no meaning without human recognition, but its recognition did not depend on any single human structure. That balance is rare. Most things depend either on nature alone or on social agreement alone. Gold depended on both in a stable proportion. It was natural enough to resist manipulation and social enough to be recognized. This balance allowed it to function across contexts without adaptation. As generations passed, the reasons for gold's acceptance faded from conscious thought. People did not remember why gold had been trusted initially. They only knew that it had been. This forgetting did not weaken trust. It strengthened it. Trust that must be justified is fragile. Trust that feels inherited is resilient. Gold's trust was inherited. It was passed down alongside stories, alongside customs, alongside warnings and habits. Children learned that some things were spent and some things were kept. Gold belonged to what was kept. Keeping does not imply hoarding. It implies selection. Not everything can be preserved. Choices must be made. Gold consistently occupied the category of what was worth preserving. This consistency shaped behavior over long spans. People learned to separate immediate utility from enduring value. This separation allowed societies to function without consuming their own foundations. Gold helped create that separation, not actively, by existing. As time continued, gold's presence became almost invisible, yet its role persisted beneath the surface of decision-making. It influenced how risk was perceived. It influenced how loss was measured. It influenced how continuity was imagined. These influences did not require awareness. People acted as if gold would matter later. Later is a powerful concept. Later extends beyond urgency. It softens extremes. It allows delay. Gold embodied later. Not tomorrow. Not next season. Later beyond memories. This temporal distance gave gold a calming effect. Calm is not often associated with value systems. Many systems depend on urgency, incentive, and motion. Gold depended on none of these. It did not need to be moved to remain meaningful. This stillness is often misunderstood. Gold did not represent stagnation. It represented preservation. Preservation is an active choice expressed through an action. To preserve something is to decide not to consume it. Gold made that decision easier by offering a form that did not degrade with time. Time is usually an enemy of preservation. Gold treated time as irrelevant. This irrelevance made gold suitable for passing between generations who would never meet. A parent could store gold without knowing who would eventually hold it. A child could receive gold without knowing who had first acquired it. Gold bridged these unknowns. Bridges are often invisible when functioning properly. They become visible only when absent. Throughout history, moments when gold was unavailable or inaccessible often revealed how deeply it had been woven into expectations. People noticed its absence not because they missed using it, but because they missed what it represented. A guarantee of recognition. Recognition is the quiet foundation of exchange. Without recognition, nothing moves. Gold ensured recognition across uncertainty. As systems continued to evolve, gold did not resist new forms of value. It did not compete. It did not argue. It allowed coexistence. Coexistence is another form of resilience. Systems that demand exclusivity tend to fracture. Systems that allow layering tend to endure. Gold allowed layering. It sat beneath newer forms, supporting them without interfering. This positioning required no coordination. It emerged naturally from repeated use. Over long spans, patterns that require no coordination tend to persist longer than those that do. Gold's pattern was simple: remain recognizable, remain unchanged, remain available. These conditions did not require management. They required only time. Time was abundant. As centuries continued, gold's role became increasingly quiet, almost geological in human awareness. Like stone foundations beneath a city, it was rarely noticed, yet its absence would be immediately felt. Gold did not need to be visible to be essential. It did not need to be central to be stabilizing. It needed only to remain. And so it did. Not as an argument, not as a solution, not as a guide, but as a silent constant beside human systems that rose, adapted, faltered, and reformed. Still present, still unchanged, still waiting. As the centuries continued their slow accumulation, gold's role became increasingly defined by contrast. Not contrast with other metals, but contrast with human behavior itself. Humans change quickly. Customs shift. Priorities realign. Meanings evolve. What one generation treats as essential, the next may treat as optional. Gold did not participate in this rhythm. It did not follow trends. It did not respond to preference. It did not adapt to fashion. This lack of responsiveness shaped how people related to it. Gold was not expected to serve immediate desire. It was expected to remain when desire had passed. This expectation was subtle, but it influenced decisions across time. When people chose what to keep, gold was often chosen not because it was useful, but because it was unchanged. In a world defined by alteration, sameness became valuable. Sameness does not excite. It reassures. Reassurance does not produce stories. It produces silence. Gold accumulated silence. Silence is often misunderstood as absence. In reality, it can signal deep integration. The more a thing is relied upon, the less it needs to be mentioned. Gold reached this stage across many civilizations independently. This independence is significant. No single culture taught another to value gold in the same way. The pattern emerged repeatedly, separated by geography, language, and belief. When patterns repeat without coordination, they point to underlying human constants. Gold aligned with those constants. It aligned with how humans perceive permanence. It aligned with how humans respond to uncertainty. It aligned with how humans carry memory forward when structures fail. These alignments did not require awareness. They operated beneath conscious reasoning. A person did not need to articulate why gold mattered. They needed only to act as if it would. Action precedes explanation. Across history, explanations followed behavior. Philosophies were written. Systems were formalized. Laws were established. Gold remained unchanged beneath all of them. When explanations conflicted, gold did not. When systems contradicted themselves, gold did not. This consistency allowed gold to function as a reference, even when definitions shifted. Definitions are fragile. They depend on agreements. Gold depended on recognition. Recognition survives disagreement. This distinction allowed gold to exist across conflict without becoming part of it. It could be taken by force and still be recognized by the one who took it. It could be lost and still be sought. It could be hidden and still be remembered. Memory did not need to be precise. It needed only to exist. Gold existed in memory even when absent. This mental presence shaped behavior. People planned with the assumption that gold could outlast them. They made decisions that extended beyond their own lifespan. Long-term thinking does not require certainty. It requires something that remains. Gold provided that something. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. Over long spans, sufficiency matters more than optimization. Gold was sufficient in enough ways, for enough people, for enough time. That is why it endured. As societies continued to experiment with new forms of organization, new representations of value, and new ways to coordinate effort, gold did not resist. It allowed itself to become peripheral. Peripheral does not mean irrelevant. It means stable. Things at the center of systems experience the most stress. They must respond, adapt, and perform continuously. Things at the periphery experience less stress. They endure. Gold moved to the periphery and stayed there. From that position, it could survive changes that consumed central structures. This survival reinforced its role retroactively. Each time a system changed and gold remained, the belief in its endurance strengthened. Belief built on experience is different from belief built on promise. Gold did not promise endurance. It demonstrated it. Demonstration does not require persuasion. It accumulates quietly. As generations passed, this accumulation of demonstration became tradition. Tradition does not need to be defended. It is carried. Gold was carried forward even when its original context was forgotten. Forgotten context did not weaken it. It freed it. Gold no longer needed to fit a specific system. It belonged to all of them and to none of them completely. This partial belonging allowed flexibility without change. Gold could be incorporated into new structures without losing identity. It could be referenced without being controlled. This balance is difficult to engineer deliberately. It emerged naturally from gold's properties and human behavior interacting over time. As history continued, gold became less a subject of decision and more a background condition. People did not decide whether gold mattered. They assumed it did. Assumptions shape systems more deeply than decisions. Decisions can be reversed. Assumptions are rarely examined. Gold lived inside assumption. Because of this, it did not need to compete. Competition implies alternatives. Gold did not eliminate alternatives. It coexisted with them. Coexistence reduced conflict. When new systems failed, gold did not gain attention through argument. It gained attention through availability. Availability is quiet. It does not demand. It waits. Waiting requires no energy. It only requires time. Time continued. As time continued, gold remained where it had always been. Not advancing, not retreating, not transforming, simply remaining. This remaining is often described as conservatism or resistance to change. In reality, it was alignment with something deeper. Human systems need at least one element that does not change quickly. Without such an element, everything becomes provisional. Provisional systems exhaust those who live within them. Gold relieved that exhaustion by existing outside it. It did not solve problems. It did not create order. It allowed order to be reestablished. This allowance is not dramatic. It does not make headlines. It does not inspire movements. It simply supports continuity. Across civilizations, continuity mattered more than innovation alone. Innovation without continuity collapses. Continuity without innovation stagnates. Gold supported continuity without preventing change. This balance allowed societies to evolve without losing their bearings entirely. As this pattern repeated across time, gold's role became increasingly clear, not through explanation, but through persistence. It was there before systems. It remained after systems. It waited during systems. And so, without intention, without instruction, and without urgency, gold continued to occupy its quiet place in human history. Still recognizable, still unchanged, still present, waiting. As this long pattern continued, gold's presence began to feel less like a choice and more like a condition of the human environment. Not imposed, not argued, simply encountered. Like certain features of the natural world, gold did not require interpretation to be accepted. It required only recognition. People did not need to agree on why it mattered. They needed only to agree that it did. Agreement of this kind is quiet. It does not arise from debate. It arises from repeated behavior. Across centuries, people repeatedly returned to gold when other forms of value became uncertain. Each return reinforced the next. Over time, this repetition formed a deep groove in human behavior. Grooves guide movement without conscious effort. Gold guided value into a familiar channel. This guidance was not directional. It did not tell people where to go. It provided a place to stand when direction was unclear. Standing still is not often considered a strength in human systems. Progress is celebrated. Motion is rewarded. Change is admired. Yet without places of stillness, motion becomes disorienting. Gold provided stillness. Not emotional stillness, but structural stillness. It offered a point that did not move while everything else did. This allowed comparison. Comparison is essential for understanding change. Without a fixed reference, movement cannot be measured. Gold served as that reference. It did not define what should change. It showed what had. Over long periods, this function became more important than any transactional use. Gold became a way to notice drift. Drift does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly. Systems rarely fail suddenly. They drift until they no longer resemble their original purpose. Gold made drift visible, not immediately, but eventually. This visibility did not always lead to correction, but it allowed awareness. Awareness does not guarantee action. It precedes it. Gold did not compel societies to act wisely. It allowed them to recognize when they had moved far from earlier conditions. This recognition mattered most in hindsight. Hindsight shapes future behavior more than foresight. People learn not only from success, but from memory of failure. Gold survived failures and carried those memories forward in silent form. A piece of gold did not tell the story of the system that failed around it, but its survival implied the story. Implication is often stronger than narration. Gold implied that systems change and that something had endured through that change. This implication influenced behavior without instruction. As human knowledge expanded and as systems became more capable of managing complexity, gold's simplicity stood out more sharply. It did not scale. It did not multiply. It did not accelerate. In an age of scaling systems, non-scaling elements can feel limiting. But limits are not always constraints. They can be stabilizers. Gold stabilized by refusing to scale with ambition. Ambition is expansive by nature. It seeks growth, reach, and transformation. Gold offered none of these. It did not reward ambition. It did not punish it either. It simply remained indifferent. Indifference is difficult to manipulate. Systems that respond to incentives can be guided. Systems that do not respond can only be acknowledged. Gold required acknowledgement rather than control. This requirement shaped how it was treated. Gold was respected not because it was powerful, but because it was uncontrollable. Uncontrollable elements tend to be integrated cautiously. Caution is another quiet stabilizer. As societies encountered new materials, new technologies, and new abstractions, gold's lack of novelty became increasingly apparent. It did not promise efficiency. It did not promise flexibility. It did not promise improvement. Promises create expectations. Expectations create pressure. Gold created none. This absence of promise reduced disappointment. When systems failed to deliver on promises, gold did not fail with them. It had not promised anything. It had only remained. Remaining is not dramatic. It does not attract attention. But over long periods, what remains shapes more than what excites. Gold shaped the edges of human systems, not their centers. Edges are where systems meet uncertainty. At edges, stability matters more than performance. Gold performed poorly by many measures. It was heavy. It was slow. It was difficult to move in large quantities. It was inconvenient for daily use. These inconveniences limited its role. Limitations are often framed as weaknesses. In gold's case, they prevented overuse. Gold could not be consumed casually. It demanded intention. Intention slows behavior. Slowed behavior allows reflection. Reflection reduces excess. Gold did not enforce reflection. It encouraged it by making careless use difficult. This subtle influence accumulated over time. It did not produce virtue. It reduced haste. Reducing haste can change outcomes without changing motives. Across generations, this effect compounded. People learned, often unconsciously, that gold was not for immediate needs. It was for lasting ones. Lasting needs are rare. They involve inheritance, survival, and continuity. Gold aligned with those needs. As human societies continued to change, gold's role remained anchored in these deeper requirements. Not because people chose it each time, but because they found it waiting there when other choices fell away. Waiting is passive, yet it is also persistent. Gold's persistence across civilizations did not come from action. It came from endurance. Endurance does not argue. It does not persuade. It does not compete. It simply continues. And so, through the slow passage of centuries, through the rise and fading of countless systems, gold continued to occupy its quiet place. Not advancing, not retreating, not transforming, simply remaining where human uncertainty eventually returns. Available, recognizable, unchanged, waiting. As the long arc of human history continued to unfold, gold's role became increasingly detached from explanation altogether. It no longer needed stories to support it. It no longer required justification from philosophy or law. Its presence was accepted in the same way one accepts the passing of seasons. Not questioned, not debated, simply accounted for. When something reaches this state, it no longer belongs to any single generation. It becomes intergenerational by default. Gold crossed generations without instruction. A person did not need to be taught why gold was kept. They observed that it was. Observation was enough. This kind of learning is quiet. It happens without language. It shapes behavior without forming beliefs. Gold shaped behavior in this way. People treated it differently from other things. They handled it carefully. They stored it deliberately. They hesitated before parting with it. This hesitation did not come from fear. It came from awareness. Awareness that gold existed outside the immediate moment. Most objects are anchored in the present. They are useful now or they are not. Gold was anchored beyond now. This anchoring changed the relationship between effort and reward. Effort could be translated into something that did not demand immediate return. Reward could be deferred without disappearing. Deferral is difficult for human beings. It requires confidence that the future will recognize the past. Gold offered recognition without negotiation. It did not promise reward. It preserved evidence of effort. Evidence is different from expectation. Expectations can fail. Evidence persists. Gold preserved evidence. As societies grew more layered and more distant from their origins, this preservation mattered in subtle ways. It allowed continuity of obligation without continuity of institution. Institutions come and go. Obligations remain in memory longer than the structures that created them. Gold allowed obligations to be settled without reactivating old systems. A debt settled in gold did not need the original authority to still exist. Recognition was enough. This allowed closure across discontinuity. Closure across discontinuity is rare. Most obligations dissolve when systems collapse. Gold allowed some to be carried through. This did not always benefit everyone equally, but it shaped how value survived disruption. As disruptions accumulated across centuries, gold accumulated experience. Each collapse added to its history of survival. Each recovery reinforced its role. This history was not written in books alone. It was written in behavior. People returned to gold not because they remembered a specific collapse, but because the pattern had been inherited. Inheritance of behavior is slower than inheritance of ideas, but more durable. Ideas change quickly. Behaviors persist. Gold's acceptance persisted as behavior. This persistence created a feedback loop. Because gold had survived before, people expected it to survive again. Because people expected it to survive, they treated it in ways that allowed it to survive. Expectation shaped preservation. Preservation reinforced expectation. This loop did not require coordination. It required time. Time continued. As time continued, gold became less associated with choice and more associated with boundary. It marked where systems ended. It marked where promises stopped. It marked where abstraction returned to substance. Boundaries are necessary for coherence. Without boundaries, systems blur into one another and lose definition. Gold provided a boundary without enforcing it. It did not stop expansion. It showed where expansion met limit. Limits are often invisible until reached. Gold made limits visible. Not dramatically, gradually. As claims multiplied, gold remained finite. As representations expanded, gold remained singular. As systems grew complex, gold remained simple. This contrast sharpened perception over long spans. People noticed when distance grew too large between representation and substance. They may not have articulated it, but they acted upon it. Action does not require articulation. Gold allowed action without theory. As the pace of change increased in human systems, gold's pace remained constant. This constancy became more pronounced with each acceleration. Gold did not compete with speed. It defined stillness. Stillness is often mistaken for irrelevance in fast-moving environments. Over long periods, stillness becomes reference. Reference allows orientation. Orientation reduces panic. Gold reduced panic not by preventing disruption, but by providing something that remained recognizable through it. Recognition is a powerful stabilizer. People can endure significant change if at least one thing remains familiar. Gold remained familiar, not comforting in an emotional sense, but recognizable in a structural sense. It did not offer hope. It offered continuity. Continuity does not promise improvement. It allows survival. Survival precedes improvement. As societies moved through cycles of expansion and contraction, gold did not align itself with either phase. It did not favor growth. It did not favor collapse. It remained equally present in both. This neutrality allowed it to persist across ideological shifts that consumed more expressive forms of value. Gold did not belong to any narrative. Narratives change. Gold remained outside them. Being outside narrative allowed gold to be reused by new narratives without conflict. Each new system could incorporate gold without needing to rewrite its meaning. This reuse extended its life. As generations passed, gold's role became increasingly implicit. It was no longer something people decided to value. It was something they assumed others would value. This assumption is the core of any medium of exchange. Gold reached this state not quickly, but thoroughly. Once reached, it did not need reinforcement. It sustained itself. Self-sustaining systems are rare in human design. Gold achieved this not through complexity, but through simplicity aligned with human perception. Heavy, rare, unchanging. These qualities did not depend on context. They were observed. Observation does not require belief. Belief can fade. Observation accumulates. Gold accumulated observation across centuries. Each observation reinforced the next. Over time, gold ceased to be evaluated. It was no longer measured against alternatives in daily thought. Alternatives came and went. Gold remained. This remaining did not mean dominance. It meant availability. Availability across time is enough. Gold did not need to be used constantly to remain meaningful. It needed only to remain recognizable. Recognition persisted. And so, as the long story of human civilization continued, gold remained alongside it, not shaping events, not directing outcomes, but quietly accompanying change with something that did not change. Present before systems, present after systems, waiting during systems, as it always had, as it still does. As this episode comes to rest, gold remains where it has always been, not at the center of attention, not at the edge of disappearance, simply present. Across the long movement of human time, gold did not rise as an idea, and it did not fall as a belief. It did not argue its place. It did not defend its relevance. It did not adapt itself to human plans. It waited. Civilizations formed structures to organize life, to distribute effort, to record obligation, to imagine the future. Those structures changed, refined themselves, collapsed, and reformed. Gold moved through all of them without absorbing their shape. It was carried, buried, hidden, recovered, handled by those in power and by those without it, stored during stability and sought during uncertainty, not because it promised safety, not because it guaranteed fairness, but because it endured recognition. Gold became money across civilizations in the same way stone becomes foundation, not through intention, but through reliability under weight. It did not create trust. It outlasted mistrust. It did not define value. It provided a place where value could rest. When systems spoke loudly, gold stayed quiet. When systems accelerated, gold remained slow. When systems disappeared, gold was still recognizable. That recognizability carried memory forward without language. Memory that effort had once been stored here. Memory that something had survived before. Memory that continuity was possible even when form changed. Gold never asked to be remembered. It simply remained long enough that forgetting became impossible. And so it stands not as a solution, not as a guide, not as a destination, but as a presence that has accompanied human uncertainty across time. Unmoved by ambition, unaffected by beliefs, untouched by explanation, waiting as it always has, not for attention, but for the moment when change slows and something familiar is needed again. And with that stillness, this part of the story rests.